Hi guys, it's Gianna. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I am a romance author and I specialize in the dark and forbidden side of romance. Today I am writing and I just thought that I would pop on and tell you a little bit about my process. I have just recently started writing a new book. Basically, the first step is I always have ideas all the time. So usually it's an idea that I've had for a while and I've had it written in my notes. And as soon as I have it written in my notes, I start doing things like creating a playlist for it on Spotify. And when I hear music that kind of triggers me thinking about that story, I'll add it to the playlist and I will start a Pinterest board for it. I'm really visual, so the Pinterest board is like a non-negotiable and something that I do for everything. I usually have the playlist and the Pinterest board and then kind of like a note. Usually the note is in my notes app on my phone so that it also has transfers to my computer so I can have it on both. And I will add quotes that come to mind, ideas that come to mind. And usually this process, this kind of like preliminary process goes on for anywhere for as little as like a year. I would honestly say I've had most of my ideas that I actually start working on from at least a year. I don't think I've ever had an idea that went so quickly from like idea to writing, just because I have so many ideas that I just don't get to them that quickly or whatever. So yeah, it's usually at least a year that I have just those like 3 preliminary kind of brainstorming avenues for an idea. And then when it actually gets time to write, that's when I really start to dive into my research phase. Now, listen, I've talked about the Clifton Strengths Finder test before, probably many times if you follow me on a bunch of different platforms. And it's basically a personality test. There's 34 characteristics and it ranks them for you after you take this test in order of most importance to least importance. My number one trait is context. And that makes sense if you've read my books as well, because most of my stories involve a lot of research. I like writing about criminals and psychopaths and maybe people with different mental illnesses or disabilities. I like writing about different locales and different cultures. I like writing about basically things that I have to learn about, because learner is also one of my top characteristics. I think that just because we write and read romance doesn't mean that we can't learn, doesn't mean that those kinds of books, love stories, can't expand our minds. So the second phase, I would say, is my research phase. And that's where I really do a lot of listening to podcasts, maybe watching documentaries. I usually try to buy paperbacks when I'm doing research so that I can like annotate them and take notes, but I do ebooks as well. A really good example, that is my book about a literal psychopath named Priest McKenna, who's the enforcer for the Fallen MC, which is a motorcycle club, an outlaw motorcycle club. And when I was writing his story, I really wanted to convey an actual psychopath, as in someone who does not subscribe to social mores, social structures. He's literally not affected biologically by kind of a herd mentality. So for a normal person, for example, who goes into a room where everyone is afraid, they will become afraid without even knowing why, because there's like pheromones in the air that group of people are excreting that we become affected by. Now, a psychopath will literally not be affected by that kind of group mentality. They also are less, like they blink less often. They have more of a predatory stare, and it's because they blink less often. There's a bunch of really interesting, scientific facts about psychopaths that I really wanted to properly convey in that book, because Priest is a literal psychopath. So, for example, he never once says in the very long book, I think it's like 600-page book, I love you. And this is a romance novel, so you're like, what? Gee, that's crazy. But he never says I love you because he does not subscribe to normal social mores. And I love you is a construct. Saying those 3 words is a construct that we built as a society. So he conveys his love in very many different ways. He says, that you're the beat of my heart. And he says that like, I will kill anyone who hurts you. He says all these things that really obviously illustrate how much he cares about her, but he never really gives in or even like acknowledges the basic ways that we think we have to express love. So anyway, to convey that, I read lots of books. I watched documentaries about serial killers, because there's a serial killer involved, about psychopaths, written by scientists. And yeah, needless to say, I had lots of nightmares when I was in my research phase of Dead Man Walking. Right now, in what I'm writing, I am beyond the research phase. I have read lots of books. Usually I read lots of books because I'm also just a big reader. So that's one of my favorite ways to do the research. So I've done my research for this book and I read books. I watched a docuseries for it. And I've actually done research on this topic kind of before, kind of adjacent. So anyway, I've done all of that and now I am writing. Now, you've probably heard about like a pantser versus a plotter. Pantser plotter. I am more of a pantser in that I will loosely have a plot. When I have an idea, what happens is I usually have the title, I have the two main characters, and then I have this like basic conflict. So for example, let's just use Dead Man Walking again. I had Priest and Bia. I had the fact that there was going to be a serial killer antagonist, and I had the title Dead Man Walking. And so I had those kind of like basic core concepts. And when I actually go to sit down and write the book, I usually have some scenes, some quotes, some pins that give life to like different ideas for the book. But it's really just those like core pillars that I have. And I sit down, open a blank Word document, set it up loosely with like formatting, and then I just start writing. And I usually let myself write unencumbered for the first at least like 20,000 words, if not more. I would say that I let myself do like the first, maybe even half of the book, really just without any kind of plotting, because I already have those foundations and I already know the characters really well. So it's just kind of me getting acquainted with the characters, letting them speak to me, letting me tell their story. And then when it comes time for kind of like the climax and the end of the book, that's when I start to go in and I usually will do like little synopses for each chapter as I get to the end, just to make sure, that all of the loose strings are tied up, that I'm not forgetting anything, that I'm hitting every note that I need to get to really finish the book with like, as in a satisfying way. So that's kind of my structure for writing the first draft of a book. It's not an exact science. It's not something that, I don't have a recipe for you to like sit down and copy me and it will lead you to write this way. This is just the way that it works for me. And I think really that you have to take into account that I've been writing almost every day since I was 8 years old and I am 31. So, that's a long time to be writing. And it's just like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours principle. To be an expert at something, he says, you have to spend at least 10,000 hours practicing. I definitely have those 10,000 hours down. So it's not surprising that I am able to create with such a loose structure, I think. I mean, it's probably also how my mind works, but it's also that repetition of writing for so long across so many years that, I don't really suffer from writer's block. Sometimes I might not be sure about where a story should go, but I usually can figure it out pretty quickly. Maybe if I talk it out to a friend. I find if you're ever stuck, if you're a writer, the verbalizing things really helps. Honestly, even for real life stuff, even if I'm struggling with something emotionally, or like I've had a conflict with someone, verbalizing it with a trusted person, not even getting their input, but just kind of airing it out loud to hear my own methodology about something really helps me figure it out. So happily, I don't really suffer from writer's block at all. Procrastination sometimes, but definitely not writer's block. And so I think, again, that's why I've been able to have this as my first draft structure and have it really work for me. I just wanted to show you also like a couple of little things that are just kind of fun behind the scenes things. So you can see here, like I love these legal notepads. I have like 50 million of these and I often just get my mom to bring them to me from her office because she always gets these. This one, obviously, I've used a lot, but this is like some old stuff from Caution to the Wind when I was writing. There's also some Dead Man Walking stuff in here. This is from After the Fall, these notes. You can see this is from a short story I wrote for the Queens of Darkness and Sin group on Facebook. I wrote 2 short stories, one with Sierra Simone and one with Parker S. Huntington for an anthology. These are my notes there, so I have like the hero and then the hero's name, and I'm kind of playing with like his first name, his last name. I usually have options. Usually the first
name really comes to me pretty quickly. And then maybe I tinker with the last name a little bit. So here I've got, Frankie is a character in the short story with Parker S. Huntington. And then I have kind of playing around with his last name. I have some quotes, scoffs at her name, the setting. I have an idea for a scene. He stalks her. She puts on a show for him, knowing that he is watching her. Yeah, these are just kind of I'll have these. This is for a book that I haven't even written yet. So I never throw these out. This is for a game of Lamsey, a card game that I played with my husband. So I never throw these out. I always have these ones on me. I have more than one. So I have these, this is on my desk right now. I also will have Post-it notes, and I'll have them on my desk. I have a little ledge, and I'll have them on my desk with maybe quotes, or I have one that has some random titles on it. It's kind of front of mind if I need it for a book, or if I took notes from something that I was reading, then I will have those up there too. I won't get on my soapbox about many things in this industry. I'm just a Canadian girly who thinks that my opinions are my own, and no one needs to hear them if they don't want to hear them. But I will say that I do firmly believe that if you are willing to do your research and be respectful, you should be able to write whatever you want to write. If I had to write just what I know, I would be writing about ethnically ambiguous Canadian girls who live on an island off the west coast of Canada, and that's just so narrow and so boring. So I really think that, again, as long as you do your research and you're respectful of the nature of the content and the story that you're telling, not only should you write this whatever story you want to write, but it's important to represent across different ethnicities, across different sexualities, across different spectrums. It's so important because there's no greater feeling than seeing something of yourself in a character that you love when you're reading a book. And everyone deserves to find love and to have a happily ever after. I firmly, strongly believe that. It's one of my defining principles in life. And so that's what I'm about. That's what I do. And I can just always promise you that no matter what story I'm telling, I'm going to do it as authentically as possible by doing my research, by having the right sensitivity readers, and by being respectful of the different nature of characters and stories that I'm telling. This is a little bit about how I do that. So now that I've gone over kind of my preliminary setup and then my writing the first draft, which I will say is also I call it my blackout period, where I really just sit down and purge. And it's to the point where if my husband were to knock on the door while I was writing my first draft, I would often struggle to figure out where I exactly was in the manuscript, because I really do black out and just kind of go into the zone. And so he knows do not knock unless it's very important, and I usually put my phone on do not disturb and whatever. I can write, I should say, kind of in any environment. I've written in the car. I wrote Welcome to the Dark Side, writing in a car on a road trip in Scotland, and also at an Irish hostel, in the main room of the Irish hostel, so that I could get Wi-Fi, and it was busy and loud and whatever. Ambient noise is fine. Sometimes I even go to a coffee shop just to have the ambient noise. I really find that it helps me focus. And I'm not sure if there's anything to this or not, but I had a girlfriend, we had to do a grade 9 science project, and she did hers on if people focus better with sound or silence. And in her findings, women actually focus better with sound. And I think that's why, we're typically better multitaskers. I think that we actually having chaos around us almost helps us hone our focus. I'm not sure if that's true, so take that with a grain of salt. It was a grade 9 science project, but I do think about that often. Anyway, so that's my blackout zone. That's when I write a book, usually very quickly, definitely within 3 to 4 weeks, I bang out that first rough draft. And then I tinker, and I can tinker with it for quite a while before I feel like I want to send it to anyone. I don't really use beta readers anymore. I used to. I do have I send it to a few friends to read to let me know what they think about it. But I was finding that with beta readers, and there are good ones out there, don't get me wrong, but just that a lot of the time they were I really like this, I really like this. And that's great, and obviously makes you feel confident about your work, but it's also not the most helpful thing in the world, because you really want constructive feedback. And that can be, if you are a beta reader or an alpha reader or whatever, it's obviously good to be enthusiastic, but even specificity and being enthusiastic, hey, I loved when he declared his love this way because based on the trauma he had from earlier in the book, it made it really poignant. Or, you know, I loved the growth of the heroine. Like, you know, she started out a little bit unlikable, but it just made her growth so much more significant. And I fell in love with her so hard by the end of the book. You know, just some specificity. So I usually use my friends for that, just because they're not afraid to hurt my feelings. I value their input. And also, like, once I tell a story, I mean, this is the artist in me, but once I tell a story and I have it out, it's usually the way that I want it to be. And that's unless I usually get sensitivity readers too. So for example, like Inked in Lies, Lila was half Mexican, half Puerto Rican. So I had Mexican and Puerto Rican sensitivity readers to give me feedback on how I represented Lila. Or for Serpentine Valentine, which was about a lesbian and a bisexual woman, I wanted to have feedback from lesbian readers to let me know how they felt that I represented Lex in the book. So I always listen to my sensitivity readers, and I really, really want their feedback because I want to, again, represent authentically and respectfully. So I usually have about, I'd say minimum 3 up to 5 or 6 sensitivity readers, because, you know, all feedback is good feedback. I want everyone to feel good about how their culture or sexuality or whatever it may be is represented. So that is a vital part of the process. So usually I get all that feedback and then I send it to my editor. She edits it, sends it back to me. I do the edits, and then I send it usually to 1 or 2 proofreaders just so that it can be like as clean as possible. In the past, I found it really difficult to find editors that are a good fit for me. And that's something too, if you're an aspiring writer, not every editor is going to be a good fit for you. Some of them won't understand your writing style. Some of them won't be flexible and you need flexibility. Some of them will be, you know, too flexible when you need rigidity. So, I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go into finding a good editor, and you really do just kind of have to trial and error until you find people that click. I have 2 editors that I love and they work amazing for me, and I adore working with them. It's like a really fun part of the process for me, not only for them to clean up my manuscript, but also to get their thoughts on my book. And I love my proofreaders as well. I kind of think that you can never have too many eyes looking for errors in your manuscript, because it's just so hard to catch all the errors. And even after books have been published for a while, sometimes people still find errors and send you emails. I actually recently just had The Fallen Men and my Lombardi World books re-edited, even though some of them had already been edited like 5 times, just to get those last few things cleaned up in there. So yeah, that's a really big part of the process, and it's a really hard one, especially because readers can be really annoyed if there's errors in your manuscript. And like, I'm a writer, I'm not an editor, right? So it's really important to have a good team in place to help you make sure that your manuscripts are as clean as possible by the time that you publish. So I get them back from my editorial team, and then I do audio. And audio is a super fun part of the process that I only started doing like last year, but I was never an audiobook girly at all. Like, I like to read with my eyeballs, but I will say audio really is amazing, especially if you're super busy, because, or if you just spend a lot of the time in the car or walking the dog or whatever, it feels like it fills up that kind of like time and makes it very multi-purpose. So I do love audio now. I'm a convert, and I got into audio literally so I could produce my own manuscripts in audio, because I'd sold the rights for a novella years ago and they developed it, and I was not happy with the narrators they chose, and I was like, I'll never do this again. I want to choose the narrators and make sure they're perfect for my characters. And just like with my covers, which I'm very obsessive about, I'm very obsessive about my audio too. So I do a lot of research on who the narrators should be. They always match the ethnicity of the character. And even with Serpentine Valentine, I also had 2 queer narrators because I felt that was really important for my queer narrative. And I will say Serpentine Valentine audio with Rose Dorio and Quinn Riley is sublime. Like, I think it's the preferred way to ingest that content, and I've never said that before, but they truly did such a fantastic job, and they really poured their hearts and souls into that audio. So that's also a cool thing, being an independent author, that you can develop relationships with different narrators, with different, you know, editors, with different production companies. And I think it really kind of just like deepens the process and the significance of the process, which is really nice and really fun. So yeah, then it goes to audio. I get that all booked up. I usually have to do that like at least 4 months before the release date, if not more. Happily, I had a little break where I was able to get really ahead, so I haven't had problems with that. But before, when I was like writing to release, like writing my book that I was about to release, it was really hard to be organized enough to get audio for simultaneous release with the paperback and the ebook. So a little silver lining of having some time to basically write a bunch of books without publishing them. So, and I should actually say, before I even write a book, usually I have the cover done. And this is pretty backwards for how a lot of people do things. One sec, let me just get one of my books to show you. So for example, we have After the Fall, which is book 2 of King and Cressida, who are in book 1, Lessons in Corruption, in the Fallen Men series. Now, this model is Christopher Mason. Oh, I love him so much. He is so gorgeous. And this model was literally the inspiration for not only Lessons in Corruption, but also for the entire Fallen Men series. I saw a picture of Christopher Mason on a motorcycle on Pinterest, I think it was. He was leaning against a motorcycle, looking kind of over his shoulder into the distance, a little bit impatiently, as if he was waiting for his lover to join him on the back of his bike. And I saw that picture and I just thought, oh my gosh, who's he waiting for? And that question, that picture led to Cressida, led to Zeuskero, led to the whole Garo family. It led to Entrance BC and the entire Fallen MC. So I knew when I was writing another book for King and Cressida that there was no option but to have Christopher Mason on the cover. Now, getting people on covers is a lot harder than it seems. There are some people who are really well established in the industry, some photographers, or it's really easy to contact them and you can buy something on their website, whatever. But I spend years sometimes looking for the right cover models for my books. Like, for example, here, let me grab it. So this is Beatrice Lafayette from Dead Man Walking. This is Janae Roberts, and she's actually an influencer on Instagram, and a quite popular one. She was my original Bea muse. Like, this was Bea in my head, always and forever. And so when I knew I was doing female covers, I was like, I need her. I can't picture who else Bea would be if not her. So I contacted her and I was like, oh my God, will you please be on my cover, whatever. You can actually see, sort of, she's holding a book and it actually says the Holy Bible on it. But yeah, like, I'm this obsessive about my covers, you know, like I basically couldn't write this book without Christopher Mason on the cover, and I couldn't do the girl covers without her as Bea on the cover. So when you're that obsessive, you need to be organized, because sometimes photographers don't respond to you ever, or models don't respond to you, or they say yes and then they say no, and there's just so many different things that go into finding the right cover model. That's why, honestly, it's way easier to do discreet covers, because you don't need anyone's permission. You don't have to pay sometimes thousands of dollars to get the right model on the cover, because you're paying the model and the photographer. Sometimes you're paying an agency. It gets super expensive to have models on the cover, which is maybe one of the reasons that also the industry has shifted towards illustrated covers, or just discreet covers in general. It's just probably more cost savvy, even though I will always be a person cover stan, and I will probably always do those just because I love them so much. Yeah, I can appreciate the need for discreet covers, you know, for religious purposes, or just if you want to be more covert about what you like to read. I love people covers. So anyway, because you have to be so organized to get people covers, I often am very organized and have those photos like literally bought before I write books. So for example, I just released Fallen Men 7, late 2023. I already have the cover for the novella coming out this year. That was a photo shoot that I had the photographer and model do in 2021, and it's 2024. So, you know, I already have that. I already had the cover done for Fallen Men 8, which isn't gonna release until 2025. So I kind of use my covers almost as like a roadmap as well for when I am writing the book. I know what the model looks like. I have the blurb written as kind of, you know, an outline, and I go from there. I had Sebastian's trilogy books done. I think I got the first one done in like 2020, which was years ago. So that's how far in advance I have my covers done. Also, because my cover designer books up really far in advance, I just like to be organized with that, because again, I'm cover obsessed and I will never compromise on my covers. And that's why I do it the way that I do, which is kind of different than most authors who actually write the book and then figure out their cover. So that is my whole ethos around covers.
Okay, that's it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed getting to know my creative process a little bit. If I didn't answer any of your burning questions, leave them in the comments, and maybe I'll do a part 2 if you guys are interested. See you guys later.